Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving into a medical paradigm shift that honestly sounds like pure science fiction, but it is happening right now. We're going to explore exactly how video games and virtual reality are completely transforming the painful and, let's face it, often tedious chore of physical rehabilitation. If you've ever had to do physical therapy, you know the drill, right? It's repetitive, it's grueling, and just staying motivated is like half the battle. But what if we could flip the script on that entirely? I want you to imagine, just for a second, replacing those monotonous, painful, repetitive exercises of traditional therapy with a fully immersive virtual world. Instead of sitting there staring at a blank clinic wall, counting out your leg lifts, you're suddenly inside a vibrant digital environment. It absolutely changes the game. It fundamentally alters how we perceive both effort and pain. Okay, let's dive into this. Think of this as our level select screen for today. We'll start with Section 1, leveling up physical therapy, then Section 2, powering patient motivation, Section 3, designing the perfect game, and finally, Section 4, essential therapist supervision. All right, jumping right into Section 1, leveling up physical therapy, the paradigm shift. And this brilliantly illustrates what we're talking about, because to really understand this shift, we have to define what digital rehab actually means today. The tech has advanced way past just slapping a digital scoreboard onto a treadmill. We've got to look past simple gamification. See, gamification just adds extrinsic rewards, points, badges, a progress bar, to standard clinical tasks, like a regular squat. It helps, sure, but it doesn't really change the exercise itself. Serious games, on the other hand, are fully immersive platforms designed with explicit therapeutic goals, where the exercise is woven directly into the gameplay. Neurologically, this is vastly different. Instead of just wanting a digital badge for doing standard squats, a serious game drops you into a virtual skiing challenge. You have to squat just to dodge oncoming virtual obstacles. The movement becomes functional, therapeutic, and intrinsically motivating, all at the exact same time. So why does that distinction actually matter? Well, studies show that gamified therapy boasts an incredibly high 87% home program adherence rate. Now compare that to the dismal 43% adherence rate for traditional exercise routines. To put that into perspective, for a patient recovering from a stroke or a severe injury, that 44% gap isn't just some abstract statistic. It is literally the difference between a failed recovery and regaining your physical independence. It's huge. Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Powering patient motivation, the psychology of play. So, we know the adherence numbers are fantastic, but we really need to understand the psychology here. Why do serious games keep patients coming back for more? Well, the success of these games rests heavily on something called self-determination theory. Basically, well-designed therapy games fulfill three basic human needs. First is autonomy. That's giving patients choices, like picking customizable avatars or deciding which minigame to play. Second is competence. This allows patients to clearly see their progression, getting score improvements, and achieving distinct, visible goals. And third is connection. This is feeling tied to a purpose, or even socializing through competitive or cooperative multiplayer modes. When a game hits all three of these targets, the patient literally stops feeling like a patient, and they start feeling like a player. There's this really powerful realization shared by a stroke survivor that I want to highlight. They said, "I used to dread therapy because the exercises hurt. With VR, I'm so focused on the game that I barely notice the discomfort." And this isn't just a simple mental trick. It is actual neurobiology in action. By shifting the patient's focus outward toward an immersive external task, like trying to catch a virtual ball, the brain actually suppresses pain perception. It does this through what are called descending inhibitory pathways. Basically, the pain is managed naturally through pure, highly immersive distraction. It's fascinating. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how we build this. Section 3, designing the perfect game, translating therapy into gameplay. So, how do we actually translate strict clinical needs into fun software? Well, we can look at concrete game mechanics derived directly from focus groups and clinical research. Let's break down exactly how physical movements map to game mechanics. Take a game like picking the balls, for example. Here, the patient uses tracked arm movements to sort virtual balls by color and numerical order. This directly improves cognitive skills and eye-hand coordination. Or consider matching shapes. By reaching out with both arms to select identical symbols, the patient works on bilateral hand functioning and depth perception. And then in a game like rabbit hunting, hitting a randomly appearing target builds vital muscle power and reaction time. So every single pixel, every game action is actually a calculated therapeutic exercise. But, the aesthetic context is just as important, and it really requires clinical sensitivity. Game themes absolutely must be carefully selected. Think about it. If a patient is recovering from a severe car accident, putting them in a high-speed, chaotic car racing game, that could seriously trigger trauma. Instead, researchers found that patients respond incredibly well to relaxing, purposeful environments. Think like a farm life theme. Imagine doing your reaching exercises by harvesting virtual oranges from a tree or collecting eggs into a basket. It's soothing, it implies growth, and it creates a really safe psychological space for healing.
To make all this work, researchers have mapped out 4 core design guidelines. First up, graphics should use simple, cartoon-like art styles. Overly realistic graphics demand way too much cognitive load and can just be overwhelming. Second, the game should replicate activities of daily living, or ADLs, things like washing dishes or brushing teeth. This translates the therapy directly to real-world functional recovery. Third, and I think this is a brilliant feature, dual avatar systems. One avatar mirrors the patient's actual movements in real time, while a second avatar demonstrates the correct form so the patient can self-correct on the fly. Finally, instructions must be multimodal. Using audio, text, and visual cues simultaneously ensures total comprehension for the patient.
So the crucial point is, well, let's jump to section 4. Essential therapist supervision. Who is really in control?
We might naturally assume the patient is the one in control, right? I mean, they're the one wearing the VR headset or moving around in front of the camera. But time for a bit of a plot twist. Thinking of the patient as the sole user is completely wrong in a clinical context. A game system cannot operate safely or effectively without the clinician. The therapist is the vital secondary user who acts as the ultimate game master behind the scenes.
Through a dedicated, portable user interface, usually something like a tablet, the therapist does 4 absolutely vital things. First, they assign the exact game based on the patient's specific impairment. Second, they customize the difficulty and the required range of motion in real time. So if the patient is getting fatigued, the therapist can literally slow the virtual falling apples down. Third, they monitor the live performance data, sometimes even using EMG sensors to read actual muscle activity during the game. And fourth, they actively step in to suppress compensatory movements. Now, to understand that last point, we have to talk about compensatory movements. This is the unintentional use of alternate joints or muscles, like swaying your trunk to reach an object when your targeted arm is too weak or in pain. If a patient is playing a game all by themselves at home, they might try to cheat to get a high score by swaying their body instead of actually using their shoulder, and that completely defeats the therapy. So the therapist uses their control interface to restrict the game inputs, essentially forcing the correct muscles to do the work and preventing the patient from forming bad habits or injuring themselves. The game is the tool, for sure, but the therapist is the guide. What we've seen today is how serious games successfully marry the undeniable entertainment value of gaming with the strict clinical necessity of physical therapy. By focusing on intrinsic motivation, really thoughtful game design, and prioritizing active therapist supervision, we are completely transforming what it means to recover from an injury. I want to leave you with this final thought. When the line between healing and playing completely disappears, how will you choose to recover? The future of medicine isn't just about surviving an injury. It's about engaging actively and joyfully in the journey back to health. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep leveling up your knowledge.